Welcome to Straight Talk with Eugene Chan. We have the chair of the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Betty Yuen, as our guest this evening to give us her perspective on the recovery of Hong Kong's economy amidst the pandemic. Mrs. Yuen is also the vice chair of CLP Power Hong Kong and has been the managing director there for 7 years. She is a chartered accountant and has extensive experience in business, management, and finance. She has also been a member of the election committee of the last 4 chief executive elections. Welcome, Betty, to the show.
Thank you, Eugene.
So many things are happening in the world right now. We have the war between Russia and Ukraine. We have the energy crisis, extreme weather. Many things are happening. And how do all these energy costs, how does all this affecting the energy costs, and how does that relate to the economy? And you being a person in the power industry for a long time, maybe you can let the viewers know how all these are interrelated.
Yes. The energy sector is really going through a crisis now, and as all of us know, that the Ukraine war since the February this year has caused a big disruption to the energy market around the world. And you have, Europe has been getting supply from Russia for many years, and with that disruption, it caused a lot of scrambling around the world for replacement energy supply to Europe. And lately, we also have the OPEC countries reducing the production of oil. So and at the same time, when many countries are emerging from the pandemic with the higher demand for energy, so both the supply side and the demand side are causing pressure, and that's why you are seeing huge surge in energy prices around the world. And in particular in Europe, many governments are having difficulties and with all the increased prices, and therefore have to give relief to their citizens. Yeah.
Would you say that the Ukraine conflict is the major cause of this energy crisis?
I think it's a major cause because of the Russia has been supplying a lot of natural gas to Europe for many years, and with all the sanctions that European countries are not buying from Russia, the replacement energy has to come from other parts of the world. But also because of, I mentioned the higher demand as the world is emerging from the pandemic, is also causing rising demand. Yeah.
I mean, just for something that we don't want it to happen, just in case if the war gets worse or gets more widespread, that means this crisis is going to be even more worsened.
I think we all hope that it doesn't happen that way, but then this stabilization is actually causing a lot of repositioning. For example, Europe in particular has been trying to displace fossil fuels with cleaner energy, but now you're seeing Germany, they are extending the life of the nuclear power station, and some are also restarting their coal units that have been mothballed. So it also will have an impact on the path to decarbonization. Hopefully these short-term measures as they try to stabilize the situation, but become an impetus for even faster installation of renewable energy in order to replace fossil fuel over the long term. But the short term, there are indeed challenges. Yeah.
Right, Betty, as we just said, winter's coming for both the UK and Europe, and will this crisis get worse? And if it does get worse, how bad will it be? I mean, we know that we hear stories about in UK, a lot of the energy cost has increased a lot.
Right.
So how bad will it be?
I think this winter is going to be particularly difficult for many countries in Europe, and we've heard in the UK that there are warnings about even blackouts during the peak period in order to save the natural gas for home heating. So I think it's going to be a very rough winter, in particular for Europe. But for the rest of the world, we're also, because energy markets are, they're interconnected around the world. They're not isolated. And all the prices for coal or natural gas around the world have risen significantly. And so we're all on the same boat, unfortunately.
Right. See, this energy crisis comes when the world is just recovering from the pandemic.
Exactly, yeah.
And I mean, we are facing rising inflation as well as rising interest rates. And do you think our world's economy is actually going towards a recession?
I think that is the scenario that many big economies are looking at, and with the commodity prices surging, higher interest rates as a result of major economies trying to stop the easing, financial easing. So I think it's going to be rough, a tough period next year still. Yeah.
Right, so let's come back to Hong Kong, where we are all in. How is Hong Kong going to be affected by this energy crisis? I mean, is it going to impact a lot on our livelihood as well as the economy, in your view?
I think Hong Kong will not be going through as rough a situation as the European countries, and I think part of it is because of a lot of the hard work that we've done over the years to diversify our fuel supplies. So, for example, using CLP's case, we have 1/3 of our energy coming from nuclear that is relatively stable in terms of cost and supply, and about half is natural gas that and then remaining 20% coal. And we have been using long-term supply contracts. So in terms of supply security, we are okay. But unfortunately, on the pricing side, our contracts are tied to international fuel prices. So there's no escape that we will also be suffering from higher energy prices.
Right, Mrs. Yuen, your chairman in August said that this is CLP's biggest ever loss, $620 million US, and said that Hong Kongers ourselves should brace for higher electricity bills. So being in Hong Kong for over 100 years, I'm sure you've been trying to save costs for us.
Yeah.
So does it mean this time we have to bear the cost of this energy crisis? Maybe
give you an example that, this year we are looking at energy bill for Hong Kong, for CLP's customers. It's going to cost us about $20 billion just for the fuel. And we have been trying to absorb some of the shock so that the customers do not have to face too big a fuel increase. But then the company is actually financing part of it, and we're running deficits of about $2 billion in our fuel account, basically costs that we haven't yet passed through to customers. But there's a limit to how much the company can tolerate. So unfortunately, energy bills will increase next year. Yeah.
Right. Something I have to ask you, because some viewers know that you're coming to the show. People are, they look at CLP as a very important utility provider for Hong Kong.
Right.
And we know that you have been diversifying your investments.
Right.
And so, for example, say in Australia, which apparently didn't happen to be having a very good result.
Right.
So does it mean that our Hong Kong people will have to partly bear some of the losses that has incurred elsewhere?
No, absolutely not. The system is very clearly separated. The Hong Kong customers will not be exposed in any way to CLP's investment in other countries. So that, rest assured, it won't happen. Yeah.
Right. So when you're saying next year we are going to brace for sort of a higher energy cost, say we've been hearing stories, say, from people from UK that it's gone up tremendously.
Yes.
What type of percentage can we anticipate that we can start planning for the future?
I think we have to review the situation with government towards the end of the year. But to give you a feel that I think Hong Kong, compared with many other countries, we are already in a better place. Using our tariff, for example, the UK's tariff is more than double our level, and you've heard figures like 100% increase over the last 18 months. And it's not only European countries, even in Asia, Singapore, Tokyo, their tariffs are 40–50% higher than Hong Kong. So I think the whole world, as I mentioned earlier, is interconnected as far as energy is concerned. But Hong Kong, I think security of supply is no problem. Pricing, there's some kind of indexation with international energy prices, but I think we will still fare better than almost most countries, not only in Europe, but even in Asia. We'll do better, yeah.
Right, Mrs. Yuen, Hong Kong. Let's come back to Hong Kong again. Hong Kong has had nearly 3 years of fighting the pandemic, and now we are finally having a free of quarantine for overseas travels. The social distancing rules has been relaxed, and we have received a lot of consumption vouchers. So do you think our economy is finally on the way of recovery? That's the title of the show tonight.
I think obviously very welcome moves by the current administration in terms of the relaxation of travel quarantine measures, and even the sentiment, and also the local social distancing rules. So I think the local sentiment has picked up. But I think we still have some way to go. Tourists are not coming still, and business travelers are still very limited. And very importantly, our border with the mainland is so important for the livelihood of Hong Kong, not only for business, but also for tourism. So I think we still need big moves in terms of whether it's, of course, with the international borders moving to 0+0, and very urgently, if we can have the border open with the mainland, even on a phased basis, then our economy will be on the road to full recovery. Yeah.
Right. So, Ms. Yuen, we have to take a break now, and viewers, and don't go away. We will be right back. Welcome back. With us this evening is Mrs. Betty Yuen, and she has been talking about how the global energy crisis is affecting the recovery of our economy here in Hong Kong. So Betty, in the first half, you have explained to us how all these energy factors are interrelated to the economy, how it has been affecting, and Hong Kong is not alone, but we are very fortunate that we are not the hardest hit compared to many cities. Mm-hmm. So let's come back to Hong Kong again, where you are the chairman of the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce. So business in Hong Kong has been very tough for the last 3 years, and now we are facing with all these energy crisis, increasing interest rate, and we hear all these long-standing F&B establishments being closed down. So what is the biggest challenge to the business sector right now? I mean, we're now hopefully at the end of the pandemic. Why are still hearing all these sort of sad news, all these long-time establishments are being closing down in different districts? What do you think?
Well, Hong Kong has always been an open economy. Our lifeline is a lot of flows between Hong Kong and the mainland, and we're the super connector, and we're also a place for people to do business and for tourists to come and have a good time. And being an isolated island for the last 3 years really got the business sector suffering big time. And we're now starting to see some light at the end of a tunnel with the international border being relaxed, but it's still not full opening. And so we still need to make further relaxation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the border with the mainland is also critical for our economy's recovery.
Mm. Yeah. If I'm going to ask you, what can the government do to help businesses to regain the momentum?
I think actually, once the border is open, I think the business sector, we are very versatile economy. If we can, again, do all those major exhibitions to invite business people here, and if we can have all this, major international events like the Rugby 7 and other major sports entertainment, you bring people here, and then because they have, Hong Kong's reputation for the last 3 years has been tarnished significantly. And for people to come here and actually seeing is believing. They will see that Hong Kong still has all the energy and the resilience, and it's a place to get business done. Then I think a lot of business people, they will be able to reconnect it with the customers, and then with the Greater Bay Area vision, I think our energy will come back very quickly.
Right, Betty, you mentioned earlier that we know that although the relaxation of the quarantine measures for overseas travel, we have seen more people going out than people coming in, because it allows, many of our friends are actually now going overseas. If you give them a call, you will know. This is still very worrying for the tourism industry.
Yes.
So as an important business chamber of Hong Kong, what will be your one-word advice to the government? What can we do? What should they do?
Really expedite the reopening, the full reopening of our border, and also have more, for the tourism industry, for example, and we also have to really reinvent ourselves. So new products, new services for tourists to make Hong Kong an attractive place to visit again. And we do have many things to offer. You know, we have all these new facilities in West Kowloon, and we have all this, a lot of connectivity has been made available over the last few years. We have the third runway, we have the bridge, the big bridge. So the infrastructure is there to facilitate more people to come. We just have to have the border open is the most fundamental thing to get the economy again.
Right. Betty, the reason why I asked you categorically what the government should do is because we know that a lot of the government administration do watch our show, and hopefully they hear our voice. And I must congratulate the government as well, because I was with one of the Caucasian ventilatory surgeon over the weekend. He said to me that many of his customers are considering even coming back because of the relaxation. Yes. So that's a good way forward. Yes. So you mentioned also just now that let people see it for themselves.
Yes.
I mean, there have been so much misconceptions.
Exactly.
And we must try to make that happen again.
Yes.
So rather than just asking the government, what shall the business community, like the Chamber of Commerce that you're leading, how shall we work together with the government and make this even more effective?
I think, as I said, once the border is open, and Hong Kong has always been very strong in doing exhibitions and bring business people here, and then if we can have synergies with the Greater Bay Area, you know, like innovation and technology is an important area. That if I know discussions are ongoing about having Hong Kong being a data interconnector. You know, if we can share data, you know, biotech is a growth area definitely. And also the finance sector, of course. Hong Kong is an international financial center. If we can expand our product offerings, our service offering, make Hong Kong even more the international, the offshore RMB center and better wealth management center. I think there's a lot going on for our industries in Hong Kong. And our competitive strength, say versus Singapore, is because we have mainland as our big supporter, and with the big market and the big area for growth and synergies. Yeah.
Right. And I've also read in news that there have been rumors, hopefully that will become a reality in a couple of weeks' time when Mr. John Lee delivered his first policy address, that there have been talks of giving away even airline tickets for people to come.
Yeah.
Do you think initiatives like that will be something that we should really push?
I think would be very helpful. You know, if we reopen Hong Kong, and as I said, we have to bring people here. Seeing is believing, and then those air tickets that the airport authority had purchased a couple of years ago would be a very good way to expedite and provide the incentives for people to come.
Yeah. Right. Another thing that I found when I was preparing your interview with you is that you realize our Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar.
Right.
The US dollar is very strong against other major currencies. So that makes Hong Kong not as attractive as a tourist destination.
Yes.
Will you be worried because of that?
I think a strong US dollar, you know, with our peg, some competitiveness will be affected. But the peg is so important for the stability of Hong Kong. So I think definitely it's something we should continue to maintain. And as I said, cost is only one factor for tourists to consider. You know, our attraction also lies in new services and products that we can offer to customers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Betty, when we go forward, I'm sure we all wanted to have a positive outlook for Hong Kong.
Of course.
But recently, your CEO, Mr. George Leung, has described our city is facing a very critical situation with 30% of the large enterprises either having moved out of Hong Kong or are considering to doing so, and about 10% has already pulled out for good. He went on to say that faced with the local academic restrictions, external economic environment, and then the possibility of war, Hong Kong has no chance to deploy in improving the current economy. So definitely not a very good outlook. So what can we do then?
I think the near-term outlook, we do have challenges, as we just discussed. But medium to long term, I'm still very optimistic about the prospect of Hong Kong, because our fundamentals are still strong, with mainland as our, at our backyard and our key supporter. And there's there are many areas, as I mentioned, innovation and technology, the green finance, and all these sectors. I think energy transition, we discussed about energy situation earlier. There are challenges, but at the same time, there are opportunities that if we can capitalize on these opportunities, I think Hong Kong will find a way to reinvent ourselves. Of course, a lot has happened over the last 3 years, and the geopolitics tensions, the energy crisis, the inflation. It will not be business as usual. We have to find a new way of doing things, but I think our fundamentals are still very strong.
Right, Betty, George also went on to say that Singapore is now really an equal rival to Hong Kong.
Yes.
But Hong Kong has more disadvantages due to our COVID policies. But
yes,
our government has to balance between to protect the vulnerable groups in the community, which we all agree.
Yes.
And also against the interests of the business sectors. You being a representative of the business sector, what will you say to the government? How can they balance this very fine line of protecting the vulnerable and the businesses in Hong Kong?
I think the vulnerable sectors we all, of course, have to protect. But then when we say it's the business sector, it's not really just the business sector, it's the whole economy is being affected. If we are continuing to have all this poor economic situation, and the employment is also significantly hampered. So I think we are in this together. And I think it's very important that the vaccination has to be a big push again for those who are still reluctant to do. And also the balance on how the hospital systems will not be overwhelmed. And I think there are ways that we can do to really enable the economy to reopen again.
Right, Betty, before the end of the show, I'm going to ask you one direct question. We know that we had this term brain drain many years ago in 1997, yes, and it looks like we're going to have that recently because exit of companies, of both locals and some expats not returning. Yes. Firstly, do you think our government is aware of this? And secondly, if they're going to attract talents from coming back, which particular area do you think we are most short on?
I think government is definitely aware of this, and I understand that they are working on this, hopefully with big initiatives coming from the policy address shortly. I think in many areas we have talent brain drain, and it is true. It's almost across the board, whether it's in the finance field, in the innovation and technology field, which we always are short of talents, and even in our engineering field. So I think today, a lot of the policies are rather piecemeal. Okay. We need a holistic approach.
Mrs. Yuen, thank you very much for sharing with us your years of experience and thoughts on how the energy crisis is affecting us here, as well as your suggestions for the government on how to lead Hong Kong out of this critical period in our economy. We look forward to the CE's upcoming policy address, and have a good week ahead, and good night.